So we're going to spend the rest of the afternoon doing hands-on. We're working in Word, in Microsoft Word. I'm going to show you how to take a Word document and transform it into a PDF document, both of which are accessible. But the steps that I'm going to give you are the same steps that you're going to use in PowerPoint, in Canvas, in other programs. So, and I will point out where each program differs. But the basic rubric, if you will, that I'm going to give you, that's what you need to know. And that's really all that you need to do to make a document accessible. Then we have videos. Videos are a little bit different, but we're going to focus on documents right now. So anything that you're putting online, we kind of talked about this before, but just, I'm going to tell you I told you now. Online documents need to be accessible. The kind of lowest bar is that they at least have to be text and not scanned. So if you're scanning something, you need to change it into text using optical character recognition. For documents that you're creating yourself, though, we raise the bar a little bit. They need to have structure. That's really important. Anybody familiar with ASCII? Do some of us remember ASCII? Plain text? Oh, yeah. Right? Kind of hard to use. Yeah, all the information's there, but it's just all run together. Structure, really important. So I'm going to talk about that. And then I'm going to give you a list to follow, a simple list, L-I-S-T. That's an acronym. It has meaning, and I'm going to give you the key to that in just a couple minutes. Graphics, any graphic that you use, and it doesn't matter what you use it in. Use it on a web page, use it in a Word document, use it in a PowerPoint, use it in your Canvas course. If you're using a graphic, it needs to have a brief, it's called a description. That's the technical terminology. But don't think description, think label. Because when I say description to people who can see, they go to, oh, what does it look like? Nah, we don't care what it looks like. That's not what we care about. We care about what is it. I will sometimes have people say to me, oh, I don't mind the rest of accessibility, but I hate having to describe the graphics. Well, that immediately tells me you've slipped from access into accommodation. All I need at the access level, which is what the creator does, is a brief label. Should be 12 words or fewer, almost always. Rarely does it need to be more than that. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Or alt attributes. It's a lot of different names. It's all the same thing. And then just for completeness, I will say your videos and multimedia do need captions and do the audio description. Or hopefully, if you're creating them yourself, you've verbalized well enough that we don't have to worry about audio description. It's already been done. Now, as you're in the process of doing this, I really encourage you, and especially those of you who are champions who are working with other faculty, we don't want to be the accessibility Nazis. We don't. We want to encourage people to do this, but we want to find ways that they will want to do it. Not just feel like they have to do it, but actually want to do it. And one of those ways is to suggest to people, as you're going in and editing your course, because we all do that. I mean, I have yet to talk to a faculty member who made their course once and never touched it ever again for years, and that was it, they were done. I mean, they may be out there, but most of us, I hope not. I kind of hope not, actually, but I'm sure there are, because there's always one of everything. I do know a few who would like it to be that way. When you're going in and fixing something, do a little accessibility work at the same time. I just talked to somebody who was like, that actually ended up being really easy. She said, I had to go in and do some revisions on this or that. She said, and I just went in and I fixed my graphics. It's like, it only took a couple minutes. And I was like, yeah, that's what we want. Is what happens is if you perceive, oh, we have to have all of this stuff done, now it becomes this huge mountain. Now it becomes the retrofitting that we don't want to do. So don't think about it that way. Literally just, do a little bit when you go in there. And where's your easy button for right now? Because probably a lot of you have stuff out there that's not done. Your easy button is in addition to that PDF, which might not be fully accessible, include that and your source document, whatever your source document was. Your Word document, your RTF, your open office document. If you're doing math, your LaTeX file. By the way, math folks, LaTeX is a great format to go from LaTeX to Braille. Having the source document, I mean, if I have to put a document in Braille for a student who's blind of a math document, please don't give me a PDF. Oh my God, that's going to be so much work for me. Give me your LaTeX file. I'm good to go. If you don't know what LaTeX is, don't worry, you don't need to know. People will say to me, I'm concerned about the security. I don't want to put Word documents up there because I'm concerned about security. Typically what that means is they don't want students to be able to copy from it. I'm going to let you in a little secret. You can copy from a PDF. You just highlight it, right-click, copy. I mean, it's literally the same thing. It's no more difficult. But under the security features in Word, you can apply permissions so that you cannot do that in Word, and that's fine. If you feel the need to do that, that's fine. Honestly, if you know what you're doing, you can make your Word document far more secure than you can your PDF document. And then you may have a rare instance, and it doesn't come up too often, but it does occasionally come up, where you need to provide a completely different alternative text document. So, for instance, I was working with a campus one time, and I was working with their campus statisticians. Now, they do these very sophisticated sorts of graphics of all kinds of information about the campus, demographics, and various different things, which are very complicated. And they were saying, oh my gosh, if we have somebody who needs to have this information, how are we going to make it accessible? And I said, well, what is your starting point? Before you crunch all your numbers and you kind of do all your pretty graphics, what does it start? Excel. Great. Put a link out to that Excel spreadsheet. And now you've got a version that is accessible. Excel is quite accessible. So you can do an alternative document. The other thing is you can have that little disclaimer saying if you need an accessible version of any of this, whatever it might be, these statistical data, contact. And then if you don't want to just have that data like readily available for everybody, make it that they have to contact you. And then if they want it, they will contact you. By the way, also the Office for Civil Rights generally, and I'm not talking courses here, but just generally documents that are on your web page, if they're older than 3 years old, they don't require you to make it accessible if it's not already. Just have that backup plan. Have that ability for people to make the request if they need it. There's kind of a recognition that older stuff is kind of all over the place. It's probably not worth going back and fixing all of that older stuff. That's not the same for courses. Courses do need to be accessible when they're being used. Here's your sort of disclaimer for buying time. You can have this little bit of verbiage on your courses on your website. If you're an individual with a disability and need a greater level of accessibility for any document on this site, please contact, and then have the person that they can contact. Maybe you, might be somebody else. Okay, let's talk about what it means to write good alt text, good alternative text descriptions. The first thing to think about is what is the intent of the graphic? Why is this graphic there? Now, this is easy for you guys who are creating your own courses because it's your course. You know why you put it there. It's your document. Really hard for us in disability services because we're like, I don't know what that is, and I don't know why they put it there, and I don't know if it's important or not important. But you know, because you're the one who's picking it. So the really big question here is this decoration or is this information? Many programs, including the most current version of Word, and I haven't opened the Word document on these computers yet, so I'm not sure if you have the most current version. So it may have the decorative checkbox. In the newest version of Word, there's actually literally a checkbox for graphics now, where if it's a purely decorative graphic, it's just you check a box. Canvas has the same thing. If you have the latest version of Word, you may have the latest version of PowerPoint. It should have the same thing. That's kind of a standard sort of an interface. Well, how do I know if it's decorative or if it's information? Well, again, you're the one who's creating the document, so you should know, did I put that in there? I mean, we put stuff in there, let's face it, it'd make it look a little more fun, a little less intimidating, a little more exciting or whatever, but you don't have to do anything with it. You don't have to know anything about it. You don't have to understand it. It's just kind of there. So you get to decide which one it is. But I will tell you that the National Federation of the Blind, their preference is, if I don't need to know anything about that graphic, mark it as decorative. I don't even want to know it's there. I just don't even care about it. And I've talked to people who have low vision who can actually kind of see the graphics, but have said to me, you know, I know if there's alt text on it, then it's important and I need to look at it. And I need to zoom in and really see what's going on with it. If it's marked as decorative, I know I can ignore it. So there's quite a few populations that really serves. Now, if it is informational, what we're really focusing on is not what does it look like, but what is it? Literally, what is this a graphic of? Is it a bear? Is it a cat? Is it, you know, the Krebs cycle? Is it, you know, what is it? And then there's a special kind of graphic that comes up sometimes. It's a little trickier, and that's when the student literally needs to do something with that graphic as part of an exercise or activity. This comes up sometimes in foreign language classes. It's like, okay, we've got a picture of a cat and a banana and a salad or whatever, and you have to then come up with the word for that in whatever that language is that you're learning. Well, that's not hard. You can just put the English word on it, and that's fine. But what if the person is learning English? Well, I can't now label it in English because I'm giving away the answer. So there are special cases like that where you may just have to work with disability services when the time comes to come up with an alternative activity. You know, maybe you'll give them manipulatives where it's okay, you got this block and that block or whatever it might be. But that would be something where it would be a workaround. Maybe it will be verbal instead of, on paper. But that's something where there are a few gray areas like that where there's really not much you can do with access. Like on our chart where we had, not much you can do with geography at the access level. Sometimes you will have that, but that's a fairly rare case and really won't apply to most of you. So when you are labeling informational graphics, do try to keep your descriptions short, as I mentioned before. Usually 12 words or fewer is best. I've done a lot of descriptions that are just a few words, 2 or 3 words. Honestly, the hardest ones are when I try to use joke graphics. It does get a little tricky. I've got a friend who's really good at describing those, a lot better than I am. If there's information in the surrounding text, captions, whatever, you don't need to repeat all of that. So you don't need to put too much on these graphics. And then again, when more is needed, DSPS is what we call it in California, but your DSS office can create a tactographic, a 3D model, something else like that if there needs to be additional information in the graphic. In most cases, you don't need to say picture of, painting of, photo of, image of. I had somebody say, oh yeah, I just say image of, and I'm thinking, yes, and then what the student is going to hear is image of, because the screen reader announces to them that it's an image. So they already know it's an image. They just don't know what it is an image of. Or that depends on the screen reader. Some say graphic. So there may, again, there's always this sort of, end of the bell curve there. There may be a content-specific reason that you need to identify what it is. If you're teaching art history, it may be important that this is an oil painting, or this is a photograph, or this is, a pen and ink drawing. That may be important for that field. For engineering, it may be important that this is a schematic, or, some sort of a particular diagram, or like in meteorology and things like that. They have very specific kinds of graphics that they use. Great. You're the one who's deciding. And if you decide, yes, it's important to say that, good, go ahead and say that. But I'm just saying in general, you don't really need to have that extra wording in there. Now, there is a special case with graphics where sometimes it's a graphic where there's a lot of text in it. And in fact, there's some graphics that the text that's in it is the point of the graphic. Think about a logo, for instance. The text of the logo, that's really the information of the graphic, is what that text is. So in those cases, you would want to include all of that text in your alternate text description. That's kind of a rare case, but that is one where you do include all of that. So you would put all of that in there. Now, there can be other situations, though. Again, say you're teaching a foreign language. Say, you're teaching about Mexico, and there's a street scene, and there's street signs, and, maybe placards or banners or whatever. Do you need all that text? No, because that's not the point of the graphic. The point of the graphic is, street scene on Sunday afternoon in Mexico City or whatever. Go with what the point of the graphic is. If you don't need to be able to read it, don't bother with it. If the point of the graphic is the text that's in the graphic, then include all of that text in your alternate text description. If you do need to include more information about the graphic, try to be very descriptive rather than interpretive. There's actually a great article for anybody who needs to do art. That's trickier. When you actually, there are people who do descriptions for art museums. Now they are going over into the accommodation piece where they're really trying to make something that is standalone, completely there for people to use. And what they have said is, they had to really realize that they had to be very clear without saying, oh, it's a pretty rendering of whatever. Well, now they're interpreting for the person. So you want to avoid that. Again, not something that most of you are going to be dealing with, but just be aware of that. It's like, the Joe Friday, just the facts. We want just the facts about what it is. Now, sometimes people tell me or say to me, what is the right way to describe this graphic? Well, there really is no right and wrong in this. This is really one where we want to focus more on what is it rather than how it looks. And as long as you're kind of just saying what the graphic is, you're in pretty good shape. The things I always say to myself is, what is the context? Keeping the context in mind. You can literally have a situation where the identical graphic will have a different description in different situations because it has a different purpose in different situations. And then the other thing I always say to myself is this something the person really needs to hear? Because if you're blind and you have to take in all of this information through listening, It is much slower to take in information auditorily than it is to take it in visually. Probably many of you have had an experience where somebody was trying to explain something to you and you say, just let me look at it. And you look at it and write instantly, like in a couple seconds after, this long explanation. Well, when you don't have vision, you don't get to have that shortcut of just looking at it. So I always think, how can I make this more streamlined? How can I make it more clear? How can I make it more to the point so the person is not wasting a whole lot of time listening to something they just don't really need to hear? They don't really need to hear a huge long description of the picture that you put of your cat in there just because you wanted it to look friendly. No, they don't need that. And this was actually taken, again, from a health book. This was at the beginning of a chapter on nutrition. So the first thing that, if you are doing this for somebody else, the first thing to ask yourself is this really more information or more decoration? Decoration, yeah. And if you got the checkbox, you can just mark it decorative and move on. But, say you don't have that checkbox, or for some reason it's like really big, so you feel like you need to put a description on it. What are they doing? They're cycling. Yeah, that would be fine. Now, if you want something a little bit longer, you can say 3 people cycling along a river. That's fine. I would not go any longer than that. It's just not worth it, because it's really just a decorative graphic. It's like, okay, sighted people, look how fun this is. Go out and exercise, you'll feel better, blah, blah, blah. Now, we have a logo. And this is a logo that they had on a web page that was advertising this event for the college. Kansas City, Kansas Community College presents an evening of jazz. Come join us for 2 hours of wonderful jazz by the lake, blah, blah, blah. Okay, logo. Text. What can we say about this logo? Well, it does have text. It does have text. So whenever you have text, you should include the text. Yeah, Kansas City, Kansas Community College logo, making life better. Boom, done. Now, I will say, this is one of those, if I say, is this decorative or is this informational? It depends on who you ask. Your marketing department has a very strong opinion about this. Most of the rest of us have a slightly different opinion about this. But I will say that if you're in a situation, and I have seen colleges who do this, for instance, they have a PDF form and every single page of the form has the college logo on it. I would describe it once on the first page, and then if you can make it decorative, put it in the background, make it decorative. If you can't make it decorative, that's when you can just say college logo. So you know, okay, it's another copy of the logo, another copy of the logo. Okay, now, identical logo, but the context here is really, really different. Now it is part of an activity in a class that, I think it was actually an economics class we took this example from. And the text says, in marketing your business, the design of a logo can make a big impression or can be a waste of money. The logo needs to be attractive, but not dominate other information presented along with the logo. In the example below, what catches your attention? So this is an activity now. This might be something that the students are having to do with other students in class. So now, all the students are going to be talking about this logo. So in this case, is color important this time? Oh yeah. Your designers are going to tell you color is really important. The fact that this text is italic, is that important? Yeah. Now you have one of those rare situations when what it looks like is the focus of the content. So in that case, yes, you would need to do a longer description and you would need to describe what it looks like. This is kind of an unusual case, but it does happen once in a while. So we came up with interlocking blue K and red C block letters on left, with the words making life better in red italics above the college name in black italics, blocked and underlined with a blue line. Notice we still try to keep it very succinct. We still try to keep it very tight. We do not give our own personal opinion about what we think is the nicest thing in the logo. We don't do that because that is for the students to do. But we give the student enough information that when other people are saying, you know, I would have changed, reversed the colors on that K and that C. I don't think it worked really well. Or, you know, somebody else might say, which would probably be me, you know, I'm not really sure that red is good color contrast. I think that's probably not going to pass an accessibility check. All of these things are going to be under discussion, and so the student needs to be able to follow along. But again, very rare. Let me give you another sort of concrete example about that. If I'm teaching biology or if I'm teaching organic chemistry or something like that, and I do talk about the Krebs cycle, I'm not going to describe it in the text for the alternate text for the graphic, because that's what you're doing in your, that's the book does that, you're talking about that in class, and really to understand that somebody would need to see a tactile graphic of it. So I don't need to go there, I just need to label it Krebs cycle. Now, You might have a testing situation where in the testing situation you say choose the Krebs cycle, and then you have like 4 different diagrams that they have to pick from. Now that's when you're getting into that other territory where you may need an alternative assignment. You may need to work with disability services to say, can you do these graphics of these 4 different processes so that the person can feel the graphic and pick the right one. Different kind of thing. Is this making sense to people? Because labeling your graphics should truly be trivial. It should literally take you like seconds. If it's taking you longer than that, you're probably working too hard. You're probably doing way, way more than you need to be doing with your graphics. Okay, so again, just to be clear, as the document creator, your job is access, that brief description, and then when more is required, that's when disability services is going to get involved. They will be doing the tactile graphics or the 3D models or finding them or whatever. That will be their job. Questions on that before we dive in? Okay, everyone was able to download our files? Okay, now we're going to jump into the helpful acronym that my buddy Elizabeth Tu at San Jose State came up with. I couldn't believe this when I was talking to her. Before I started doing these particular sorts of presentations, I was focusing more on the other end. I was taking the documents that you guys created and making them in a large print, into Braille, into electronic text. I was focusing on training people on that aspect. And then I was talking to my friend and I said, gosh, I'm going to be starting to train faculty on how to create accessible documents. And she said, oh, I just tell them it's a list, L-I-S-T. And I went, oh my God, how brilliant is this? This woman is amazing. I usually come up with good ones, but she really beat me to the punch on that one. So, list, L-I-S-T, what does it stand for? L is for links, I is for images, S is for structure, T is for table. We're going to dive in, and I'm going to explain each of those to you and how they work. But this is it. Not hard. This is what we're going to focus on to create an accessible document. It's very, very easy. And I make it a colored list because I always want to remind you to watch your color contrast. Color contrast is really, really important. And a lot of people don't worry about it because if you're doing black on white, you're good. You don't even have to think about color contrast because you're not really using any color. But people who are using color, and PowerPoint almost always uses color, you need to be aware of the color contrast. So I use these colors on the slide very purposely as a good, bad example. So the white, easy to see, right? Even in the back, guys in the back, no problem, right? Yellow, not too bad, it's okay. Blue, guys in the back, easy to see, not easy to see, right? Not good color contrast. Might look pretty, but it's not good color contrast. It's something you always have to check. You always have to check your color contrast. And just, please, as a personal favor to me, no yellow on white. But that one just really bugs me. It's like, really? So I was at a presentation for Academic Senate at a campus a little while back, and the person before me was presenting on this really important topic, and the really important parts about this topic were the due dates, which were in light blue on a white background on PowerPoint. You couldn't read them. It's like the most important thing in the entire presentation, and you literally could not read it. You have to remember, when you're creating something, you're a couple feet away from it. That's a big difference in terms of visual reference from 20 feet away from it. So you always have to think about that with color. And I'm going to talk about a tool in just a minute to help you. There's one other big thing to pay attention to with color, and that is not to use color alone to represent information. In other words, don't use color by itself. Combine color with some sort of a symbol or a font or a typeface or something like that to convey information. So just as an example, maybe you have a handout for your students and all of the terms that are in red are the vocabulary words and all the ones that are in green are going to be on the test. Well, gosh, the greatest preponderance of confusion when it comes to color is with red and green. Yep, red and green. It's the most common type of color blindness is red-green color blindness. By the way, it is sex-linked. No, your bold is fine. And you can even combine bold and a color, and there are people that will be a great assistance to. I don't want to discourage people from using color. It's just don't use color by itself. So in our example with the vocabulary words, make your red vocabulary words say red and bold, and your green vocabulary words green and italic. And then it doesn't matter if you can see the red and green because you've still got the bold and the italic. So combine them. Combine them. I don't know if anybody noticed, but on my little charts slide that I had earlier with access and accommodation, it was not a solid color. One of them had stripes, one of them had dots. So even if there were no color, you could still distinguish between the two. It's not perfect, but a good sort of rule of thumb with color is if you print it out in black and white, see if it still works. If it still works in black and white, you're probably pretty close to being able to use color. By the way, I had somebody in one of my classes one time, and she was a native Californian. Her whole family were native to California. Her brother was driving across the Midwest, and he called her frantically on his cell phone and said, the stoplights are not vertical, they're horizontal. Where's the red? Because he could not distinguish between red and green. He did not know which one was the red light. It's on the top when it's vertical. He'd never seen it flipped horizontally. And she said, well, is there other traffic around? He said, yeah, I just hope they're doing it right because I have no idea. Literally no idea which one was which. By the way, in case you don't know, you guys know? Where's the red? It's on the left. Yeah, it is. It's on the left. But yes, it is a big issue. There are certain professions, like I was talking earlier about the capacitors. There's certain parts of electronics that you cannot go into if you're colorblind. You cannot get certified. It's one of those funny things with that. It's not considered a disability, by the way, but it is a big issue for a lot of people. So color contrast, and that is a big issue for all of us, like the person who thought it was a good idea to use light blue text on a white background for the really important stuff. There is a great little tool called a color contrast analyzer. It's a free little piece of software, and the way that it works is it sits on your desktop and it gives you a little eyedropper tool. And you take an eyedropper of your foreground color, take an eyedropper of the background color, and then it tells you, yeah, that's sufficient contrast, or no, that's not sufficient contrast. If you're using PowerPoint, I would really recommend that you download this little tool. It is free, and check all of your PowerPoint slides to make sure, well, check your themes, not every single slide, but check your theme to make sure, yes, this theme has sufficient contrast. One of the things that you're going to find is gray on white, even slightly graying, often will not pass. It's amazing how little you'd have to take it down from black. I had somebody tell me she was actually doing a theme that she thought was black on white, and she just thought for fun she would check it, and it didn't pass, and she thought, what's going on? And then she realized it was slightly gray. So it doesn't take much. Colorsafe.co. Now this is one to share with your designers. What are your campus colors? Maroon. Did y'all hear that? Maroon. Okay, I have been at campuses. The first campus I started out that had red, it was claret. And then we have a campus just up the road, it's scarlet. And another one that it's cardinal. They're all dark red, right? I mean, but from the designer's perspective, each of these is a very specific color of red, not to be confused with Stanford's color of red or Harvard's color of red or whatever. They're very specific. So what ColorSafe does is it allows the designer to input the RGB color, the CMYK color, the Pantone color. These are our codes. They're numbers. Each color gets a number or a set of numbers. They can input that, and then it will pop up with a list and say, here's all the yellows that work with all that. Here's all the greens that work with that. And that way, designers don't have to do sort of a trial and error. They can just enter their color that they have to keep, because sometimes you get choices with some of the other colors, and that way they will be safe in terms of accessibility. And then there's some color simulators here. If you've never thought about it or never looked at, what are things like for somebody who's colorblind? It's kind of interesting. Color Oracle I like because that one I believe is the one that actually lets you upload a graphic and see what would this graphic look like with different sorts of color blindness filters attached. Yeah, it's pretty interesting, color blindness, very interesting.